Hello, this is Mark from Excel Off the Grid. If this is your first time here and you want to take your Excel skills to the next level, then don't forget to subscribe and sign up for notifications. That way you won't miss a single video. A top 10 list is a common form for displaying information, especially in dashboards and summarized reports. It's easy to create the list when working with sorted data. Just cell link to the top 10 items in the list and that's it, easy. It's also relatively simple when working with autofilter, tables and pivot tables, as it's a default filter setting within these features. However, when creating a top 10 with formulas on a non-sorted data set, things become a little bit tricky. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to do it. And through these methods, you're not restricted to a top 10, but you can create a top 5, a top 8, or any number you choose. Some of the most common formula problems with top 10 lists are dealing with duplicate values, working with categories, and changing it to be a bottom 10 rather than a top 10. Well, don't worry, we're going to cover all of these and they're all included in the example file. And if you want to work along with examples in this video, you can find a link to the example file in the descriptions box below. If you're an Excel user lucky enough to have a dynamic array enabled version of Excel, then the good news is that creating top 10s with these new functions is easy, and I'll show you how to do that in this video as well. Okay, let's get started. To start with, we're going to be using the traditional Excel functions. By that, I mean the non-dynamic array functions. Using these, it's easy to obtain the top 10 values, but getting the names and labels which relate to those 10 values, that's the challenge. In our example file, we have 26 customers, each with their location and sales value. If you're working along with the example file, then we're starting on the top 10 non-DA tab. Right, now let's make a start. The first thing we want to do is to create a counter that counts from 1 to 10. And we'll use this in our formulas in a few moments. So starting in cell H4, I'm going to type equals row, open bracket, F4, close bracket, minus the row of F3. Press F4 to add the dollars and lock in that cell reference, close bracket, and then press return. Now what this formula is doing is calculating the row of F4, which is the fourth row, and the row of F3, which is the third row. So 4 minus 3 equals 1. Where this comes in useful is where we copy down this formula into the rows below. As you can see, here we have a counter that goes from 1 to 10. And we're going to use this in our next function. And we're going to start there in cell G4. So in cell G4, I'm going to use the large function. So equals large, open bracket. Now large has two arguments. The first is the range of cells from which we want to find the largest value. The second argument is which large value do we want to find. Do we want to find the first largest, the second largest, the third largest, and so on and so on. So in our example, our range is cells C2 to C27, and I'll press F4 to lock in those cells. Then I put a comma, and then I'll reference cell H4 and close the bracket. Next I press enter to lock in that function. When I drag that down, we now have a list of the top 10 values. Now I don't need the calculations in column H anymore, so I can consolidate those into the formulas in column G. So I'll select and copy the row formulas and replace the last argument in the large function with those formulas. Press enter to accept that and then drag that function down. I can now clear the formulas in column H. So found the values, next we need to find out who the customer is. For this we're going to start with a basic index match formula combination. So I'm going to start in cell F4 equals index, open bracket. I'll select the cells from A2 to A27 and then press F4 to lock in those cell references. Comma match, open bracket. I'll select cell G4, comma. Then I want cells C2 to C27 and I'll press F4 to get those dollars in place as well. Comma, I want a naught for an exact match, then close bracket to close the match, and close bracket to close the index. I'll press enter, and as we can see, the result there is golf. And if we look at our data table, we can see that golf is indeed the highest value. Right, so I'll drag that function down. Now if you look closely, we've actually got a bit of an issue. If you notice, the value alpha has appeared 3 times. And this is because the value 80 is not unique. There are 3 80s in our source table. And an index match can only find the first value. So the first 80 matches against the first item it finds, which is alpha. And the second 80 matches against the first item it finds, that's alpha. And so does the third. That also matches with alpha. Clearly this is a big problem and we need to work out how to fix it. And for this we're going to turn to an advanced array formula. It's going to be quite long, but I'll take you through every step along the way. And because this is an array formula, we'll need to press Ctrl-Shift-Enter every time we enter this formula. Okay, we're going to start up here in cell H4. And the first thing we're going to do is calculate how many times each of our top 10 values appears. So equals COUNTIF, open bracket, and the range that we're looking at to start with is G4 colon G4, and the item we want to count is the number of times that the value in G4 exists. So in the range I just need to find the first G4, press F4 to lock in that cell value, and as shown by the value in cell H4, there's only one instance of the value 120. When we drag that down, there you can see that we have 3 instances of the value 80, and we're going to be using these formulas in column H in a few minutes time. So let's clear the current formulas in column F, and we'll type equals if, open bracket, I'll select cells C2 to C27, press F4 to lock in those, equals G4, comma row, open bracket, I'll select cells C2 to C27 again, and I'll put dollars on those to lock those in again, close bracket, minus row, open bracket, select cell C1, press F4 again to lock in that, close the row function, and then close the if function. So what this formula is doing in plain English is it's saying if cell C2 equals G4, then return the count of the rows between C2 and C1. Then because it's an array formula, it'll go on to the next row. So say if C3 equals G4, then return the count of rows between C3 and C1. And it keeps going. If C4 equals G4, then return the count of rows between C4 and C1. And this will go on all the way from C2 to C27. Now the easiest way to see this is to select that function and press F9. This will instantly calculate the result of what that function is. And as you can see, there are multiple calculations, one for each row. And all of those results show false, except one. There we can see the value of 7, and that is because the 7th row within C2 to C27 matches the value of 120. Press Ctrl Z to get that back, and now we're going to add in another function. Small, open bracket, click at the end, comma, and then select cell H4, close bracket. Now if we select all of that and press F9 again, it will calculate down to the value 7. And that's because the small function is like the large function. It takes a range and then which position you want to find. So the range that we gave it was the result of the if function, and in H4 we said we wanted to find the first smallest value. Now if you remember, all those values were false, apart from one which was 7. Now all those falses get ignored, and 7 becomes the smallest value. Remember, that is the 7th value in the range C2 to C27, because that's the one that matches with the value in cell G4. Control Z to bring our function back. And now we're going to use the index function again. So put index, open bracket, select cells A2 to A27, press F4 to lock in those, comma, close that, and because this is an array formula, we need to press Control, Shift and Enter. So once again, our first value shows golf. Let's copy that down. Fantastic. So rather than seeing alpha, alpha and alpha against each of those 80 values, we now see alpha, echo and tango, which are the correct results. So let's have a look in cell F11 and test this out, just to make sure we understand how this works. So let's select that if function and all the parts in it, and then press F9. Now if we look closely, we can see that there are 3 numbers contained within that if function. There's 1, 5 and 20. That's because they're the 3 positions within cell C2 to C27 that contain the value 80. Okay, now let's select the small function and all its parts, and because H11 has the value of 2, it should find the second smallest value, which in the result from the if function is the 5. So press F9 again and we get the result of 5. And when we feed that into the index function, we look at A2 to A27, and the 5th row from within that range is echo, which is exactly the result that we've returned. Okay, now all that's left is for us to tidy this up, and we're going to insert the calculations in column H into our calculations in column F. So in H4, I'll select the count if, copy that, press escape to get out of that. Then in F4, I'll paste over H4 with the count if that we copied. Remember, Control Shift Enter because it's an array formula, and we can drag that down again. Then I can clear everything in column H. Look at that, we've managed to get a top 10 even when there's duplicate values. Okay, now let's move on to look at how we get the bottom 10. So I'm going to copy those first 2 lines and paste them into the bottom section below. I've double clicked on that cell, G18, and it's still referencing F3, which is now incorrect. So I'll drag that down into cell F17. Press enter on that, and I'll replace my large with a small. I'll select those and drag them down, and there it's showing that the smallest value of 50 matches with the customer called Delta. And if we check our data table, we see that that's correct. And there we have it, they are our bottom 10 values. Okay, now let's move on, because sometimes we want to calculate the top 10 results, but only where specific conditions are met. So we're going to move on to the top 10 non-DA with criteria tab. Okay, so here we have our sheet with cell J4 containing the value of London. That is a data validation list in which we can select London or Birmingham. Now what we want is whether we select London or Birmingham, that our top 10 values adjust to only show the customers in those locations. Let's start in cell G4. Now at the moment, cell G4 references cells C2 to C27. We're going to wrap some logic around that. So rather than C2 to C27, it will only show the values from C2 to C27 that match with the correct location. So I'm going to click there between the bracket and the dollar, and then put if, open bracket. I'll select cells B2 to B27, press F4 to lock those in, and then I want to know where that equals J4. I'll also press F4 to lock that in, and then press a comma. I then need to close the if function, and I'll do that by closing the bracket after C2 to C27. Now this uses the same logic as we've already seen. The if function checks cells B2 to B27, and if the value matches cell J4, then the value in cell C2 to C27 is returned. So if I select the if function again and press F9, again it's returned a number of values, but it's only the values which match London which are returned. Anything that doesn't match London displays as false. As we saw before when we looked at the small function, the false values are ignored, which means the population of values that we're looking at is only those that matches the site of London. Let's press Ctrl Z. Now this is another array function, so we're going to need to press Ctrl Shift and Enter. We'll drag that down, and as you can see, some of our values have changed. So if I change that to Birmingham, we get different values. However, our customer names are not correct. If you look at the customer Kilo, you'll see they are based in Birmingham, but yet we have a site of London. And that's because of these multiple values again. So let's go in and change our customer function. Let's start on cell F4. We're going to use a similar logic to what we used a few moments ago. After our if, we'll enter an extra opening bracket. So after G4, I'll enter a closing bracket, then multiplied by, opening bracket. I'll select B2 to B27 and press F4 to lock in those, and then put equals J4, and again I'll lock that in with F4 and close bracket. So here we're using a similar logic because we're only allowing the function to return the values which match the site shown in cell J4. This is an array function again, so Control, Shift and Enter to commit this into Excel, and then I'll copy that down. Fantastic, and as we see, the value that previously displayed as Kilo now displays as Papa, and Papa is a customer based in London. Okay, now let's go in and do the same on our bottom values. So cell G18, so we'll add if, opening bracket, and then select cells B2 to B27, press F4, equals J4, which is London, our site, and press F4, then a comma, and then just close that bracket at the end of that range. Press Ctrl Shift Enter to commit that in. Now let's do the same on cell F18. Start by adding an extra bracket to the if. So after the G18, we'll close that bracket, multiply, open bracket, select B2 to B27, F4 equals J4, and then F4 that, close bracket. Again, this is an array function, so press Control, Shift and Enter to accept that, and then copy that down. Now when we select Birmingham or London, it then displays the correct values in there. Okay, fantastic. We've now looked at a top 10 with criteria. Now what we've got to do is look at the dynamic array alternatives. And as you'll see, these are much easier. So if you're working along with examples, we're now moving on to the top 10 DA tab. So far, everything seems quite complicated, doesn't it? Wouldn't it be better if we could use some more straightforward formulas? Well, the good news is we can if you have a dynamic array enabled version of Excel. Okay, so let's start on cell F4. So equals sort, it's one of the new functions. Open bracket. And we're going to select cells A2 to C27. Comma. We want to sort by the third column. Then a comma, and then -1 because we want to go in descending order. Now we're going to use the index function once again. Index. Open bracket, click at the end, put a comma. And we're now going to use the sequence function. So the sequence function is used to create a sequence of numbers. By entering 10 into the brackets, it's going to create a list from 1 to 10. Which means that the sort, which is sorted in descending order, the index will only return the first 10 results. Put a comma, then a curly bracket to open a constant array. type a 1, a comma and a 3, and then a closed curly bracket. This is telling the index function that we only want to return the first and the third columns from the range A2 to C27. Then all we have to do is press enter. Fantastic, look at that. Such a short, simple, beautiful function. There's not a Control-Shift-Enter insight. Fantastic stuff. How simple was that? Okay, let's now use that for the bottom values. So I'm going to copy that function from cell F4 and then enter it into cell F18. Now because we want an ascending list rather than a descending list, all we're going to do is change the -1 to a 1. Press enter to commit that function, and that's it, we're done. How simple was that? Finally, we're going to move on to our top 10 DA with criteria tab, and we'll look at dynamic arrays with criteria. Now let's edit the formula in cell F4. So rather than just a sort, we also want to apply a filter. So we're going to use the filter function for this. Filter, open bracket, so A2 to C27 remains as it is, comma, then we want to filter on cells B2 to B27, and we want to filter them where they equals J4. So first Excel is going to filter to include only those cells which match cell J4, which is London. It will then apply the sort on column 3 based on the value and calculate those in descending order. Those will then be used by the index function to return only the first 10 rows and columns 1 and 3. When we press enter, it will commit that function into Excel, and when we use the data validation, those numbers update accordingly. So let's just correct our bottom 10. We'll copy that same function from F4 into F18. And again, we'll change that -1 into a 1 because we want the numbers in ascending order. Press enter to commit that. There we have it. And again, when we change our data validation list, those numbers will update to reflect the customers which are based in London or Birmingham. Well, that's it from me. There's lots more in the description section below so that you can learn how to use some of these functions further. I don't know if you'd agree with me, but once you know these techniques and formulas, calculating a top 10 in Excel isn't actually too bad. But I think the thing that this video proves most of all is how good dynamic arrays are, because we don't have to rely on complex array formulas any longer. Well, that's all for today. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like and comment, and I'll catch you next time.